Hi, Gary Chillingworth here for Airgun Magazine, Shooting and Country TV. Welcome to Life at the Range. Gary takes on the world's day 2. Right, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at setting up the range card. It's relatively easy. Basically, it's just a matter of putting out pieces of card at set ranges and shooting them and learning your aim points. We're also going to look at elevated targets and targets below your feet, although that's going to have to be brief, but I'll explain that to you later. And also we're going to have a little look at bracketing the kill zones and things that you can learn. So that's basically what we're going to do today. We're going to get on with it. Welcome to Life at the Range. And tomorrow we're going to be looking at kneeling shots, standing shots, and the other things you may need to learn if you're going to take on the UKAHFT World Championships, and we're going to do our final preparation. Welcome to Life at the Range. Okay, so we want to set up a range card, and that's a really important thing to do. But the first thing we need to do is we need to know where our targets are going to hit. And to be honest with you, the only way you can do that is to get some land or go to a gun club, land that you've got permission to shoot on, and set out some targets. Now, I'm lucky here at the range. I've got out to 45 yards and I've got metal targets. Now, metal targets are really good, but they won't give you accuracy. They're great for practice. I mean, look at this one from Flop Over. This has been sitting in the undergrowth for a while because it's a big old 40mm kill. But let's say you're trying to set up. Well, if you hit it high in the kill, you'll knock the target over. If you hit low in the kill, you'll knock it over. To the right, you'll knock it over. To the left, you'll knock it over. As long as it goes through this hole, the target's going to fall over. So you could essentially have a gun that shoots like a shotgun, and you won't know because you're going to be knocking the target over every time. So we don't want to be shooting targets. What we want to be doing is shooting paper, and essentially just a piece of paper or a piece of card with a line. Now, make sure if you're shooting paper, you've got to have a backstop behind it. So get yourself a cardboard box, stick a bag of sand in it, draw a line on a piece of paper, sellotape it to the box, and start shooting. Now, there are two really important zeros that you need to know. So if you're going to set your gun up at 40 yards like mine, you want to draw a line, put your box out at 40 yards, and you need to fire 3 or 4 shots and make sure that you're cutting the line on each occasion. Now, as we all know, and now people, please don't shout at me, but when you look through a scope, if that is your crosshair, in fact, I'm going to pass you over to the fat man in the conservatory and he will give you a brief explanation on pellet trajectory. Keith Warburton, don't get angry. Okay, so I've been allowed back in the conservatory as long as I don't have a rifle in here. And now we're just going to talk about pellet trajectory. Now, this causes so many arguments, it drives me crazy. When you look at the way a pellet shoots is, right, if this is your barrel and this is your scope, that obviously you look in a straight line. And with your pellet, the pellet will leave and then it will start to drop. Now, in reality, how will those ever intersect with each other? And this is what causes the confusion. What we need to remember is that either the scope is angling down or the barrel is angling up. So basically, it will look like the pellet is flying in an arc. And that way it intersects with here. So again, here is your scope. Here is your barrel. Your scope is looking in a straight line, and it will look like the pellet will leave here, it will raise, it will come down, and that's your 45, and there, roughly, there is your, let's say, your 8 yards. Now, if you have a multi-aim point reticule, that's your crosshairs, then you'll have maybe a dot, and then a dash, and then a dot, and then a dash, and you'll have the same up here. You'll have a dash, and then you'll have a dot. So this is your 40 yards, which is here. This is your primary zero. This is your secondary zero, and that will probably be somewhere around about 13 to 14 yards, depending on how high the scope is over the barrel, depending on a whole host of factors, depending if you're shooting 1.7 or 2.2, depending on the speed of the pellet you're shooting. They all change. This is why we are setting up a range card. But for instance, let's say you're shooting on 177, 780 feet per second, and you are shooting with low mounts. The pellet will leave the barrel. It will intersect with its first point, which is here, 2 mil dots below the crosshairs, 8 yards. It will then continue climbing, and it will intersect with its second point here, around about 10 yards. So you would put this mark, your 10-yard aim point, in your kill zone that you want to kill if you're shooting a target at 10 yards. It's continuing to climb. It then gets to the secondary zero, 13 yards. It then gets up to here, around about 15 yards. So it's now climbing above the crosshairs. So your 15-yard mark will probably be somewhere around about there. It then climbs and climbs and climbs, and it gets to the top of its apogee, the top of where it appears that the pellet is flying. And that will probably be somewhere around about here, and it will be around about 25 yards. But here to here, chances are the pellet is only moving about half a pellet mark. So that's why you often hear people say, oh, my pellet is flat from 18 to 28 yards, because that is, say, 18, that there is, say, 28, and there is very little movement there. So the pellet is now starting to drop again. So now that's, say, around about here, 30 yards, coming down to here. So that's going to be around about here, 35 yards. It then comes back to its primary zero, 40 yards, keeps on coming down till it hits to about here, 40, that's a terrible drawing, 45 yards. So I hope that you can understand that the fact that even though the pellet isn't flying an arc, when you're thinking about the way you're writing your zero, it would appear to fly in an arc. And you need to understand that before you can start really setting up your gun. Okay, so as we can now see, the appearance is that the pellet flies through an arc. It starts off hitting 8 yards below your crosshairs, then 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And on my target, around about 14 yards, it crosses through that line, the initial scope line. That is a really important trajectory to know. If you turn up at an event and it's blowing a hoolie and it's really windy, there is no point in checking your zero at 40 yards because the pellet is going to be affected massively by the wind. So you're going to need to check your zero on your secondary zero, which is your short zero. So at 15 yards, say for instance for my one, I know it's crosshairs, so I'll find a 15-yard target, I'll put it out. If all my pellets are drilling a single hole at 15 yards and they're not moving left or right, it's going to be near as damn it good down at 40 yards. If I start adjusting at 40 yards with wind blowing left and right, I'll just end up with a bad day because you're adjusting in the wind, which is wrong. So they are your two most important zeros. First of all, get your 40 yard or 35 or 30, whatever you want to do, and then your secondary zero. So make sure that's good for testing. Okay, so now what we need to do is we now to put out targets. Now, you need one of these. It's quite simple. It's a tape measure. It goes out to around about 50, 60 yards. Available from eBay for about £5 or £6. Don't use a laser rangefinder. Don't step it out. It's not accurate enough. Get one of these, mark it out, place marks out, or just measure it each time. And you just need to start building a card. So you've got your initial zero at 40 yards. So now draw a new piece of paper with a new line, bring it in at 35 yards. Shoot it, shoot it, shoot it. And you'll see where the pellet is hitting in relation to your crosshairs. Now, most companies, Optisan, MTC, Hawk, you'll be able to go online and download a copy of your reticle and print it out. So you can write down next to it where your pellet is hitting. Now, once you've worked out all of your aim points, you can then go out, start putting targets out at 25 yards, again, bits of paper, and then just use your aim point on them. Bang! Should hopefully split the line. If it does split the line, then you know you've got it accurate. So just keep on drilling and drilling and drilling and making sure that everything is correct. That's the first point of your range card. Okay, so we're now going to do our 25 yard and our 20 yards. We've got our target set out at 25. I believe 25 is going to be just below the top hat. So we'll put that aim point on the line and see how we go. Now, it's really important that you don't adjust your scope. Once you've got your primary zero at 40 yards or 35, whatever it is, if you then start adjusting for your 20s and your 25s, you're going to have to do everything again. So get your primary zero and then leave it alone. Okay, so top line, just below the top hat. Well, that was actually more on the top hat than just below. So let's put another one just to the right hand side of it. Wow, that went low. That may have been me. To be honest with you, I shot a hell of a lot yesterday and my eyes are tired. But, okay, don't know if you can hear that, but there's also wind against. I don't think that would have made that much of a difference. All right, let's do it again. Right, concentrate, Gary. Breathing, trigger. There we go. I think that one was just me. Sometimes I'm more focused on what I'm going to say next to what I'm actually doing shooting wise. Okay, let's just do a third one. Again, low. Not going to lie to you, that's a little bit concerning. Might be the wind. Honestly, not sure. Not sure why it's doing that. Right, well, so let's check our left and right. So we're going to aim at one of the pellet strikes and see if we're going left or right. Okay, we'll go with the far left hand pellet strike. Going a little bit low. Right, one more. We're going to aim at the same pellet strike again. It might be a case that I'm expecting PCP accuracy out of a spring gun. We're still trying to dial this rifle in. As I say, it's new, it's got a new barrel, it's still bedding in. Okay. Right, there is actually quite a lot of wind down there. There's more than I thought. Okay, so not unhappy about that. Okay, let's move it back to 20 yards. And our 20 yard aim point, actually that's pretty much the same. Tell you what we'll do, we'll do our 35 yard. So we'll move it out to 35 yards and we'll shoot the bottom card. Okay, so we're out at 35 yards. Looking at our yardage chart, we've got our 40 there and our 30 at the top of the post. So our 35 will be in the middle of those two. Although for some reason I haven't written it down on there. That's bad. Don't rely on memory when you're shooting, because when you get stressed and you can lose information really quickly and make silly mistakes. And the best shooters in the country are the ones who just don't make mistakes. They've got a routine. Richard Woods is one of the best. He's all right, fella. But if you actually watch him shoot, he's so methodical and he does the same thing every time. Gets down, bobs his head, checks his target, breathes correctly, trigger control, and then shoots, kills the target, gets up, you're right, fella. That's Richard for you. But when you actually watch him shoot, if you ever get a chance, shoot with him. He's a really impressive person to watch. Okay, so bottom line, halfway up the post. Okay, on the line. On the line. Well, a bit under the line. And there we go. So I would say we now know our 35-yard point. So what we can do is on our card, we now know our 25, so we can tick that as checked. We'll put our 35 just there, and we tick that. And that's what I like to do. As I've checked each one on card, I tick it off, and I know that they're now accurate in relation to that. And then once I've got all the information written down on my scrap bit of paper, I'll then turn it into something a little bit more easy to read, laminate it, just in case it chucks it down with rain, because you don't want paper mache. Well, I think that's pretty much it. Okay, so now we need to start getting a bit of practice in. Now, another part of your range card is learning to look at the kill zones, how big they are within your scope. Again, I'll put a picture of my range card here. I've got it here. Hang on a sec. Oh, here we go. And as you can see, it says, get rid of that bit of paper now. It says like 35 mil of 45 yards is 0.6 of a mil dot. At 40 yards, 0.7. At 35.1, sorry, 1. And at 30 yards, 1.1. The problem is, 35 mil at 45 is 0.6. A 30 mil at 40 yards is 0.6. A 25 at 35 is 0.6, and a 20 mil at 30 yards is also 0.6. So how does that help? Well, it doesn't really. But what you do need to do is, if you look at a target and then you start bringing in other things, like, as we said, the head bob, go and have a look at my range finding video and that will explain the head bob to you. But essentially, as we all know, with a parallax on a scope, if I set the parallax adjuster to say 25 yards and I move my head up and down, the crosshairs shouldn't move. But when I look at it at 40 yards and I move it up and down, it will move round about a mil dot, but it will also move around about a mil dot at 45 yards. It's not that accurate. So if I'm moving my head up and down and it's showing that it's moving around about 1 mil dot, I know the target is long. It's 45 yards. So I can now look on my target, on my chart. So I've bobbed my head up and down. It's 1 mil dot of movement. So I know it's 40 or 45 yards. Tractor. So I know it's 1 mil dot of movement. So I then start looking at my kill zone. So I'm going to measure it. I'm going to put one of my fixed points, say my crosshairs on that, and I'm going to measure it across, and it's coming in at 0.6 of a mil dot. So I know it's either 45 or 40. Well, the problem is I still don't know if it's 45 or 40. So now what I start doing is I start looking at the plate. Are all of the strikes low that have missed underneath the kill zone? Are they all low in the paddle? Are they all above? If there are loads above, I know it's probably nearer 40. If there are loads underneath, I know it's nearer 45. Use your history to tell you what you need to learn. So range finding isn't just using one thing. It's get down, look through your scope, bob your head, 1 millimeter, look on your chart. So that means it's 40, 45. Measure your kill zone, 0.6 of a mil dot, 45 or 40 yards. Now look at your history. Everything's low. 45 yards. Bang, flop, hopefully it goes over. Don't just use one thing, and this is how we need to build our range card. Also, start building in a set routine in your head every time. Have a look, measure, 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 look, 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 and then you should be okay. Now, for those of you who want one of these sheets, they're really easy to make in Word, and I'm just going to put up a little video and show you how to do it right now. Okay, so we want to build a Word document with a 35mm kill, 30mm kill, 25mm kill, so that we can place them out on the range. You know, essentially we can use them for a bit of bracketing and learning what targets look like at different distances. Now that's easy to do in Word, so we go up to the top that says Insert, left click, go to Shapes, left click, go to one that says Oval, left click, and then we're going to drag a line down, doesn't matter the size. Then up here you see these different colours. Now if you notice, the initial ones have got like a white banding around them. You don't want this one. You want to click down, click down, click down, click down. Nice solid colour in black. Go over to the right hand side, left click, 3.5 on the height, 3.5 on the width, and there we have a perfect 35mm target. If you want to do another one, say now we want to do a 30mm, again, Insert, so left click on Insert, left click on Shapes, left click on Oval, drag it down, doesn't matter on the size, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sixth one down, fill it into black. Over on the right hand side we're going to do 25mm, 2.5, 2.5, and there we have an absolutely perfect 25mm target, which you can place out on your range and you can look at, you can measure, you can do whatever you want with it. You can shoot into it if you wish. Okay, so this is your standard flop over target. Faceplate, kill zone, you hit the kill zone, the plate falls over. These things can give you lots and lots of information when you're looking through a rifle scope. Now back in the day, people used to measure the hinge. These are, I think they're 55mm, and as we showed on our range card, at 45 yards, that's 1.3 mil dots. At 40 yards, it's 1.5. At 35, it's 1.7. At 30, it's 1.9. If you can see that hinge and you can measure it accurately, you can tell the range. The problem is, people now make these targets with different size hinges, bigger ones, smaller ones. Also, they have a tendency to put plates in front of them so you can't see them. Sneaky call setters. The other thing people used to do is measure the gap from the middle of the kill zone to the bottom of the hinge, because back in the day, the squirrel, the rat, basically the squirrel, the rabbit, the rat, whatever, the kill zone was always in exactly the same place. It was only the bit around it that changed. So they would measure from the middle of the kill zone to the bottom of the hinge, and that was a fixed distance. Again, people like flop over now make targets with different sizes. So again, you can't really do that anymore. What else can you measure? Well, if you've got something like a rat target or even one of these, you could measure the distance. If you see it's a crow, you could measure from there to there. No. If you go to flopover.co.uk, you'll see they do a mini rat, a medium rat, a large rat. They do a mini crow. They do all different faceplates at different sizes, and there are bespoke targets as well. So again, that doesn't work. All that you've left with is the kill zone. Now, the kill zone you can sort of measure it. But I know for a fact that one of the call setters has got some 32, 33mm targets, and they will class as, say, a 30mm target, so they can only go out to 40 yards. But when you look at them, they'll look bigger than a 30mm at 30 yards, so you'll think it's shorter. Basically, all of this bracketing lot is not really working anymore. Now, let's say, for instance, Perry from Nomads had a 32mm target. Well, if we measure it, it's still going to come out at around about 40 yards. So these do work if you mix them with the head bob to see how much your crosshairs move within the kill zone. One good thing is if there is a load of uniform sized pellet strikes on the faceplate, stick your crosshairs over the top depending on what scope you've got. And I know that if I put my crosshair over the top of a pellet mark and I can no longer see the pellet mark, that's 45 yards. If it's got a slight amount of bleed out, it's 40. And if I use one of the hashes on my ML10 ret, then, and the hashes are the same size, it's 35. If you've got 3 or 4 uniform sized pellet strikes, that's a way that you can also bracket. So bracketing can help, but it can also hinder. So use the pellet strike, the head bob, measure your target. If you can see a kill, I would say don't measure it because it's probably been left deliberately to catch you out. And that's about it. The range card is really important for your aim points. The rest of the information, don't rely on it. It's good to have, but it can steer you wrong. Look out for traps. Okay, so one thing you are definitely going to come across at the HFT World Championships are elevated targets and targets that are downhill. Now, my plan was that I've got a large tree that I was going to put a target up and we were going to film it. The problem is, in my direct line of sight, I've got farmers working in the field. So even though it's not a problem with actually hitting the target, there's a little bit of wind up there. And also I'm going to be raising my barrel in direct line with where they are, which I'm not going to do. Because of a negligent discharge or something like that, we've always got to be 100% safe here on the range. But we'll just go over it. Now again, I've done a video on elevated targets, well worth going to have a look at. But a general rule of thumb. There's a thing called the rifleman's rule. I'm not going to go into it because we don't want a half-hour, 40-minute long video. But when you are looking through your scope, so when you're looking through your gun and you're starting to raise up, if you're above 45 degrees, gravity will start acting on the pellet. If it's flying in a straight line, it's easier for gravity to pull the pellet down, whereas if you're shooting up, even though it has the same effect, it doesn't affect the pellet as quick, or as I generally understand it. There is a theory, there is an equation you can go and look at to your heart's degree. But this is the easy thing to remember. If you're aiming above 45 degrees, if you're cracking your neck back, especially if it's a 15mm, say at 25 yards, your pellet is going to hit high. It's going to hit half a kill high, 3/4 of a kill high. Basically, a good rule of thumb is if it's, say, a 25-yard kill, 15mm, and you're having to crack your neck to shoot it, stick that 15-yard, so that 25-yard aim point in the bottom of the kill, or maybe even fractionally out of the kill. Now, if you're shooting in a downward trajectory, and again, you're around about 45 degrees and you're having to bend your neck over, it's exactly the same. The pellet will also hit high. So put your aim point in the better bottom of the kill. That's shooting elevated and de-elevated targets. Sorry I couldn't shoot it, but you can hear them working out there. Just have to be safe. Well, thank you so much for joining us at the range today. I hope you've learned something, and I really hope that if you're coming to the Worlds, it's going to help you. If it's not coming to the Worlds, I hope it'll help you anyway. Had some great comments in the on yesterday's video, and somebody pointed out that, Gary, that's not your usual CP 10x32, that's the variable one. Yeah, you're correct, well spotted. Basically, my fixed 10 is on a 2.2 rifle for a video we've got coming up very, very soon, and I didn't want to take it off because I've just about got that zeroed in. So what scope am I going to be using? Well, I decided not to go with the EVX, or I've not decided not to go with the CP or the Connect. I wanted some more weight on the top of the gun to help deaden the recoil. There's not much recoil anyway. And there's just been something nagging at me that when I used to shoot well, I had a heavy scope. So I've put this EVX 10 by 44, 10 by 42, I can never remember what it is, 10, 44 or 42, on top, and I'll tell you, I'm getting some lovely results. So I'm pretty sure we're going to go with the TX200 Hunter Carbine, the EVX from Optisan. Oh, somebody also asked what this is. No, it's not a laser rangefinder. 3 lengths of barrel weights that you, barrel weights, they're 3 lengths of car weights, wheel weights, that are basically taped to the top of the barrel just to take out that little bit of extra flip. Works quite well. So far it's working quite well. Well, I think that's about it. We'll be back tomorrow with kneeling, standing, supported stuff, final prep, and my nominations for who I think are going to win the Worlds. I've just been doing a little bit more shooting, and I think it's not going to be me, but hopefully we'll have a good day. Thank you so much for joining us at the range. We'll see you again tomorrow. Ta-da.